Hello and welcome to the Journeymen podcast. I'm Joseph Corlett.
I'm Mark Reeves.
Join us as we travel from club to club, delving into the stories, tales and myths that help define the ethos and identities of football clubs all around the world.
We'll look at club history from all angles, whether it be a team's tactical style, superstitious fan rituals, or discussing the best players to grace the shirt.
For our base in Berlin, we aspire to give clubs of all sizes a platform to discuss their greatest triumphs and toughest heartbreaks.
We'll take you through fascinating untold stories with tales of heroes, villains, promotions, relegations, and everything in between.
We're back for episode 11. We had a wonderful time in the Basque Country with Athletic Club or Athletic Bilbao, but we're moving on to a brand new team and we're heading back to closer shores for us as English speakers. So, last time we were in Bilbao and with Athletic Club, we left our clue that the next club is where Athletic originally took their coloured shirt inspiration from, their blue and white halved shirts. So Mark, do you want to let us know who is our brand new team?
Yeah, so after that confusion last time, it's not Southampton, it's not Sunderland, it's of course Blackburn Rovers, or if you were a Pez fan back in the day, Lancashire Blue.
Finally a more traditional Pez name.
I'm glad we picked this episode solely because we can get back to Pez names again.
Before we dive into the club, we like to kind of go over what our kind of previous knowledge or impressions of the club are. I think Mark has definitely got the bulk of the story with this club already.
The first thing I sort of wrote down was just those memories of growing up with those great Premier League teams of the sort of early mid-2000s teams like Morton Gams Pedersen, Rocky Santa Cruz, Jason Roberts, Ryan Nelson, David Dunn, and yeah, not forgetting the crazy chicken owners, nearly signing Ronaldinho, and of course also being a Premier League.
To be fair, I haven't got much to add. Very similar to Mark there, other than two guys, belters, coming to mind. He managed to score from only 40 yards out. Yakubu's little stint up front was quality, and also the fans throwing a chicken on the pitch in protest at said crazy chicken owners, like Mark just said.
Glad you also went for the chicken angle.
I've been a wild rover for many a year, and I've spent all my money on best seats right here. There's no point in saving for a rainy day, 'cause I'll be a wild rover till my time.
Nice. So as always, we start off with the sort of general location, geography, the landscape of where this club is. So Blackburn is an industrial town within Lancashire, England. The town is on the southern edge of the Ribble Valley, about 8 miles east of Preston, about 20 miles north of Manchester.
Blackburn, unfortunately for us, is not a port city or town, but it does have historic canals that run from Leeds and Liverpool, so it is a hearty part of the industrial kind of north of England.
And it's the second largest town in Lancashire, being second after Blackpool, one of our other earlier episodes. So we're in a similar part of the world as episode 1.
After the 2011 census, Blackburn has a population of just over 117,000 people, whilst the wider borough of Blackburn, with Darwin included, also reaches just over 150,000 people.
And it's a former mill town, and Lancashire in general was very much the site of a lot of textile production ever since like the 13th century, when wool was woven in people's houses in the domestic system, which was basically when people would spin the wool or whatever textile they were doing within their own house to then sell off to the state.
Flemish weavers who settled in the area in the 14th century helped develop the woolen cottage industry, and the most rapid period of growth and development in Blackburn's history coincided with the industrialisation and expansion of the textile manufacturing industry.
However, Blackburn's textile sector fell into decline from the sort of mid-20th century onwards, and subsequently faced similar challenges to most other post-industrial northern towns.
From some history about the town of Blackburn into some more football geography, and we're going to dive headfirst into their rivals and friendships.
The biggest rival being Burnley, and really we could just speak about this club because it's a very long-standing, very bitter rivalry. Burnley, also known as Lancashire Claret. Obviously, we've got Lancashire Claret and Lancashire Blue. And both of these teams contest the East Lancashire Derby.
Battling for the Pez name of Lancashire in the derby as well.
Doing their colour proud on Pez.
The East Lancashire Derby is also known as the Cotton Mills Derby. This is clearly a reflection on the post-industrial kind of textile factory industry in both towns and the close geographic rivals between the two Lancashire towns, as they only lie 18 kilometres apart.
And local press in recent times have dubbed the game El Lang Clasico, which it's not great, but Yeah, we'll let them have that. But yeah, despite that sort of fun-sounding name, don't get this wrong, this is a rivalry full of hatred. And yeah, so Burnley fans are referred to from Blackburn fans as DINGLES, which comes from the British soap opera Emmerdale, naming him after the farming Dingle family. And Blackburn are simply referred to from Burnley fans as Bastard Rovers.
Which I quite like, that one has an in-depth meaning relating to like an iconic piece of
pop culture.
Pop culture, yeah, exactly. And meanwhile, the other one is just straight to the point, you bastard Rovers. Maybe this says that the Blackburn fans have a little bit more up there in the head, that they can think of something a bit more intelligent.
True, yeah. And former Blackburn Rovers player Simon Garner, we found like a good insight from him into the rivalry. He said, people outside of East Lancashire simply do not realise. They have no idea what it's like. Hatred is not a word you want to use about sport, but there is pure hatred there. In all of his years at Blackburn, he never truly found out why. He said, like, Preston and Bolton are the same distance from Ewood Park as Burnley, but there's nothing like the same quite level of hatred.
He continues on with a unique story. I was leaving the players' entrance at Turf Moor after we'd won there. There were lots of people milling around, and one Burnley supporter came up to me and said, "Are you Simon Garner?" He was carrying a carving knife and said he was looking to stab Simon Garner with it. Naturally, I said I wasn't him and he would be along in 5 minutes, and then I legged it back to the players' lounge. I've never run so quickly in my life. I love how calmly this fan was
just walking around with the knife.
Are you Simon Garner? Are you Simon Garner? Do you know Simon Garner?
It reminds me of the story of Dean Windass when he was playing against Robbie Savage, and like Savage had like done him in the game. And he said he was absolutely fuming after, and he was like, right, I've got to get him. And he spoke to one of Savage's teammates who he's friends with, and his teammate said, "Oh, Robbie's up in the players' lounge." So Dean Windass went up to find him and said he was literally going up to like smack him, and he said he got there, and as he got there, Robbie Savage turned around and went, "Oh, have you met my parents?" And he was like, "Oh, I can't hit him in front of his mum and dad." So he shook all of their hands and went, and then he came out and told his teammate what happened. He was like, "No, his parents are not even here. Like, the parents don't come to watch you." And it was just a random old couple at the bar that he did that to like screw over.
Fair play, that's a smart move there. Simon Garner continues, at Ewood, we'd been awarded a penalty, and I went up to take it when a brick landed at my feet. The Burnley fans were tearing down the stand, pulling it apart piece by piece. The players had to go off, and when we came back, I had to retake it. I scored it, though. I always scored against Burnley.
That's probably why the bloke was looking for him with a carving knife, wasn't he? Always scored. Yeah, and another former player, Gordon Taylor, sums it up pretty well. He said, "I can give you one example of what the rivalry means. When they proposed to move the maternity unit of the local hospital from Blackburn to Burnley, there were protests because no supporter of Blackburn would want their children born in Burnley."
Absolutely understandable.
So
completely understandable. You got to think, as they've mentioned before, that people outside of Lancashire don't know. This is probably some admin. Oh yeah, we'll just move the ward to Burnley, and meanwhile it has caused uproar in the local community probably. Due to the clubs being in different divisions at different points, the rivalry sometimes has periods of dormancy. However, unfortunately, Burnley take the narrow edge of 45 wins to Blackburn's 41 wins, with 22 draws over 108 games played in this fixture.
Yeah, and this sort of rivalry between the two teams has continued into the 21st century. At times it's been feisty and entertaining, and other instances have been marred by extreme violence. Other rivalries for Blackburn Rovers also include Preston, Bolton, Wigan, all just by proximity close by.
With so many clubs up there in the Lancashire area, it is just sometimes so many derbies, so many little clashes between all these teams. It's very easy to see why all these clubs don't get along with each other purely by the proximity, as you just mentioned. Yeah,
and when we get to the friends section, our usual section, I really struggled here, and I could not find any even just slight connection to anyone really.
We dived into all of our resources online, we got in contact with Blackburn fans, and literally nothing came up. So hey, it's just rivalries here at Blackburn Rovers.
If you do have a friendship for us out there, please send it in. Maybe we could even include Athletic Club in that because of the kit connection there. Maybe that's how we tick that box for this episode. So as we now move into the sort of early beginnings and forming of the club, how we always do, we'll start from the very beginning. And the club was actually founded following a meeting at St Leger Hotel in Blackburn in the November of 1875.
Going back a lot earlier than normally we dive in this pod. The meeting was organised by two men, namely John Lewis and Arthur Constantine. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss the possibility of forming a football club to play under association rules. 17 people attended the meeting, the majority of whom were Blackburn Grammar School old boys.
This amount of people from the club, this sort of educated middle class, was of vital importance. These men at the time were at the heart of Blackburn's commercial life. Through their education and their business activities, they were well placed to exploit the opportunities presented by the expansion of this growing game of association football.
Just the use of the word old boys has me thinking back to our Newell's episode. Yeah. Rovers' first ever game was reported on in the Blackburn Times on the 18th of December in 1875, and it was reported as follows. On Saturday afternoon, a football match was played at church between members of Rovers Club, Blackburn and the Church Club. The ball was kicked off by the Blackburn captain at 3 o'clock, and after some fine play lasting about 30 minutes, a goal was scored by Bert Whistle of the Blackburn Club. With a hard struggle, the Church Club succeeded in scoring the next goal, and the game resulted in a tie.
How mental is it that we have a match report from 1875? And also, I love that this is how traditional we are in England. Like, it was the first ever game in 1875. Of course, it was the 3 o'clock kickoff. They were very serious about protecting the grassroots of football even back then. Can we not just watch it on TV? No, that'll destroy the game. 1875.
As we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, for many years Blackburn and the cotton trade were virtually synonymous. The town's abundant cotton mills, related trades, provided a wealthy, educated middle class to form and administer the club. They also provided a vast pool of customers who were drawn in growing numbers to watch the increasingly popular game of association football.
After the formation, Rovers became one of a small number of clubs formed in the industrial North and Midlands, who provided a challenge to the more aristocratic amateur Southern clubs. The club's colours were influenced by the fact that several of the influential club members were former Malvern College students. Jack and Fred Hargreaves, who both worked in the legal profession, became very important figures, and they had both played for Malvern College and advocated that Blackburn Rovers adopted the quartered shirt design of their school shirts. However, they suggested that the traditional green should be changed to the light blue worn by the Cambridge University football team.
In the beginning, finances were a bit of a problem because they had no ground of their own, and the only income they had came from the players' subscriptions. In the first year, this came to around £2.40 in today's money.
This was spent on items such as a set of goalposts for 44 pence and a football for 75 pence in the equivalent of today's money.
Imagine an up-to-date Adidas full spec like World Cup ball costing 75p.
And such was the growing interest in the game, there were several other noteworthy clubs in the Blackburn district at this time, such as Cobwall, St Mark's, Park Road, Darwin, Church and Blackburn Olympic.
The club's first ground was located at Ooze Head. Amongst its more quaint features, the ground featured a cow pit or a watering hole near the centre of the circle. This minor inconvenience was overcome by placing timber boards down over the turf for the duration of the match, which I can imagine would be a bit of a hard underfoot if you were running through the centre circle all of a sudden from the grass onto this wood.
Especially if it's like a slide tackle and you end like someone ends up sitting you down in the cow pit.
Oh dear, ouch.
But yeah, so not surprisingly, the stay at this venue was very short-lived. They moved firstly to the Pleasington Cricket Ground and then on to Alexandra Meadows, where in January of 1878 they met the renowned Partick Thistle team, with 2 goals from Dick Burstwhistle bringing a famous victory.
Although the club was formed in 1875, details of the early days are still very sketchy, and it was not until their 1878-79 season that they were covered in detail by the local press. The progress made by the club in the early days can be gauged by the fact that in 1879 they were ready to enter the English Cup for the very first time.
After defeating the Tyne Association and Darwin Rovers, they crashed out the competition following a 6-0 thrashing at Nottingham Forest. At the time, Rovers' supremacy in Blackburn was under threat from the Blackburn Olympic Club that we'd previously just mentioned. And as a result of the need to improve the standards, they began to look northwards to Scotland for reinforcements.
Friendly defeats at the hands of teams such as Rangers had made them aware of the superior ball skills and greater tactical awareness possessed by Scottish players at the time. The capture of Rangers captain Hughie McIntyre had an enormous influence on the club both on and off the pitch. The influence of Scots into the game was to cause problems at a later date, however, when allegations and rumour of professionalism became rife.
Yeah, the first club to actually seek reinforcement from Scotland was local rivals Darwin. Their successful recruiting policy established them as a major club and bitter rivals to Rovers. One of their most famous imports was Fergie Souter, a man who was later to become a Rovers legend.
He was a stonemason by trade, and he had actually joined Darwin for the 1879-80 season, although there was no actual record of him working as a stonemason locally.
He was said to have found the local stone too hard to work with, And with no visible means of support, the only conclusion people could reach was that he was being paid to play. And this is, remember, at a time when he wasn't allowed to be professional.
During the summer of 1880, he caused still more controversy by moving to Blackburn Rovers, a local rival of Darwin. The move again stirred up accusations of professionalism amid claims that Blackburn had offered him improved terms.
The suitors' move inflamed an already sort of testy local rivalry, and these bitter games and crowd trouble dogged the future Darwin-Blackburn matches for years. I love the idea of all this like trouble kicking off in like the 1880s. But yeah, Suter is arguably, from some of the sources we found, the first recognised professional footballer.
A Lancashire Cup game between Rovers and Darwin in the November of 1880 revealed the depth of feeling between the two clubs. Bad behaviour on the field was more than matched by bad behaviour off it, with the crowd invading the pitch on more than one occasion, forcing the referee to abandon the game at half-time.
Yeah, I was imagining a lot of Victorians clad in Stone Island gear at this point, like all this trouble kicking off. For the 1881-82 season, the club had acquired yet another new ground at Leamington Street and proceeded to spend £500 providing facilities for the spectators. And this move would actually coincide with their best effort in the FA Cup to the date.
The third round draw paired them with Darwin, and Darwin's fortunes were now in terminal decline following the loss of their Scottish mercenaries, and Blackburn enjoyed an emphatic 5-1 victory. As the cup run gathered momentum, the town was gripped by cup fever. A semi-final replay victory over the Wednesday increased the temperature even further.
In the final at the Kennington Oval, their opponents would be the Old Etonians. And despite the backing of many enthusiastic Rovers fans, Blackburn lost to the only goal of the game. The defeated team were welcomed back to Blackburn though as heroes, and they enjoyed some measure of compensation when they defeated Accrington at the Burnley Cricket Club to lift the Lancashire Senior Cup. Rovers' sort of love affair with the FA Cup had just begun, and for the first 3 decades of the club's existence, it should be noted like the cup success was the most important thing at this time. Was to the FA Cup was like the priority. So yeah, this love affair is just beginning.
And I'm guessing it was extra sweet to win that local Lancashire Cup on Burnley's cricket club soil.
Oh yeah, definitely, I'm sure.
The pain of the early cup exit in the 82-83 season was made much worse by the fact that Blackburn Olympic brought the trophy home to Blackburn for the very first time. In fact, they were the first northern team to win the cup. Not to be outdone, Rovers went all out to emulate Olympic success the following season. They defeated Southport, South Shields, Padiham, Staveley, Upton Park and Notts County, conceding only 1 goal in the process before a meeting with the famous Scottish club Queen's Park in the final.
Yeah, this was actually the first time a Scottish team had reached the final of the tournament. Queen's Park had actually knocked out Blackburn Olympic, who had won it the year before, on their way to the final. So before the match, there were temporary stands built at the Oval as the pavilion was reserved for members of the Surrey County Cricket Club. And there was a record-breaking attendance with between 10 to 12,000 fans, making it the most attended match in London. Special trains were laid on the railways to transport spectators from Lancashire.
The final coincided with the international match of Scotland versus Wales, which took place in Glasgow on the same day, with many Scottish internationals in Queen's Park's team picking to play for their club team rather than their country. The final turned out to be full of controversy, not because of a bad refereeing decision or maybe off-the-field antics, but because of differing interpretations of the offside rule in England and Scotland resulted in confusion on the pitch, with players basically playing 2 different types of the game at the same time at one of the biggest games in the entire country.
Rovers would actually end up winning the cup for the first time with goals from Brown and Forrest, but unfortunately Queen's Park left the ground complaining that they'd been robbed by the officials. In another more dramatic moment where they felt like they'd been robbed, as well as them running around and not playing to the same offside rules. They also had a goal disallowed during play, and the referee later said that they had actually scored this goal, but the players hadn't attempted to claim it, so he didn't bother to award it, which I think is amazing. So this goes back to what people say now of like, you always appeal. Because if not, the referee might be like, well, yeah, he didn't shout for that goal, so you know what, you're not fucking having it.
The match was refereed by Major Francis Marridin of the Royal Engineers, who was also president of the Football Association at the time. As a player, Marridin had played in the first ever FA Cup final in 1872. He is credited with having founded the Royal Engineers football team in 1869, which went on to win the FA Cup in 1875. The club had been founded in at least 1863 and is notable as the first side to exploit modern teamwork and passing tactics.
Hello and welcome to the FA Cup today. On the outside left with this new passing tactics.
Pep Guardiola his time.
I just love the idea of like what were they doing before these passing? Because I think it is one of those where it's like one man runs with the ball and they all just are like around him, like smashing into people who try and come near him. In his last final, crowds invaded the pitch and soldiers had to clear the field. He was considered, this is a direct quote from something at the time, one of the outstanding referees who really knows the rules. And I mean, he really did apply the rules of if you don't appeal for this goal, I'm not going to give you it. And he was widely simply known as the Major.
What an outstanding nickname for a referee, to be fair. Yeah. The Major. Blackburn had acquired a taste for glory after that cup victory, proceeding to retain the trophy in 1884-85 season, beating Queen's Park once again in the final, but this time by 2-0. Yeah,
and they'd actually make it a hat-trick of cup victories the next season when they won again following another 2-0 victory, this time over West Brom, which meant that the FA Cup had gone 4 years in a row to Blackburn, 1 to Blackburn Olympic and then 3 in a row to Blackburn Rovers. One thing worth pointing out here is at the time England's most sort of prominent club, Corinthians, actually refused to play in the FA Cup. They would only play like amateur football games, so this definitely helped their cause. But of all the teams in it, like clearly Blackburn was this hotbed of football at this point.
Whilst Rovers were gathering success on the field, football was undergoing change off the pitch as professionalism was finally accepted by the FA after considerable pressure was exerted on it by the clubs.
Trying to get all their Scottish mercenaries into the team.
Rovers' run of success came to an abrupt end in the 86-87 season when they were dismissed in the second round of the FA Cup by Scottish side Renton. The team was undergoing a period of change, and despite reaching the semi-finals in the 87-88 season, Rovers were not felt to be as strong as they once had been.
Their refusal to increase a number of professional players on their staff meant that they were falling behind clubs such as Bolton, who had embarked on an aggressive recruitment campaign. If it wasn't for the fact that Rovers were able to raid Blackburn Olympic, that early rival and also a winner of one FA Cup, for players, as they sort of declined in influence, they would have been in serious difficulties.
They struggled to a narrow victory over local club Witton in a match billed as being the championship of Blackburn, underlying the falling of their playing standards.
Yeah, so within this sort of era of growing professionalism in the game, the year of 1888 would then mark a huge landmark moment for football in England, but also very wide-reaching effects of all sorts of places across the world, which was, of course, the birth of the Football League. The first season of the Football League would take place a few months later in September of 1888, with the 12 member clubs from the Midlands and the north of England being Accrington, Aston Villa, Blackburn Rovers, Bolton Wanderers, Burnley, Derby County, Everton, Notts County, Preston North End, Stoke, West Brom and Wolves.
Each club played each other twice, once at home, once away, like we all know, and 2 points were awarded for a win and 1 for a draw. This point system was not agreed upon until after the season had started, with the alternative proposal being 1 point for a win only. Preston won the league title without losing a game and completed the first League Cup double by also taking the FA Cup as well. Teams finishing at the bottom of the table were required to reapply for their position in the league for the following year in a process called re-election.
This era of the Football League and also the process of re-election and things we covered in a lot of detail in our very first episode for Blackpool. So
I think it also came up in our Ipswich podcast as well.
Probably. It's definitely in the Blackpool one, in that area of the world, isn't it?
1890 saw a further piece of the jigsaw fall into place when Rovers moved ground once more. The move was prompted by the landlord of Leamington Street ground raising their rent.
Yeah, this had led Rovers to cast their eyes around town for a suitable alternative venue, and Ewood Park was the site chosen, a name that will be familiar to, I think, pretty much everyone. At the time, Ewood was an all-purpose sports ground which hosted football, athletics, dog racing and trotting.
I wonder if they were doing sack racing like they were doing in Bilbao.
I just wonder if they're going to fill in a watering hole on this ground.
It had been built in 1882 by 4 local entrepreneurs, and the club leased the ground for 10 years to begin with, at an annual rent of £60 for the first 5 years and £70 for the remainder.
Firmly settled in their new home, the club began to concentrate on playing matters once again. As holders of the cup, Rovers were amongst the favourites to take the trophy by the time the 1890-91 season began. They did not disappoint their followers, and although it could be argued that their obsession at this time with cup success deprived them of a first league title, because as they progressed in the cup, they seemingly put a lot less effort into their league fixtures. Victories over Middlesbrough, Chester, Wolves brought a semi-final tie against West Brom, which was played at Stoke.
After a hard-fought end-to-end battle, Rovers ran out victors by 3-2. Their opponents in the final were Notts County, a team that had beaten them 7-1 at home some weeks earlier in the league. There was suspicions at the time, however, that Rovers had allowed County to win in order to inspire a fatal dose of overconfidence.
But it would be the real Blackburn Rovers who turned up at the Kennington Oval to give Notts County a lesson, as first half goals from Dewar, Southworth and Townley underlined their superiority. And at the end of the match, they'd retain their trophy with a 3-1 victory. And this would actually make them, at the time, like the new sort of FA Cup kings. And they'd now captured it 5 times within 8 years, making them the joint most successful team in the FA Cup so far at this point, alongside Wanderers.
I just want to shout out the level of detail we know about these games happening. The fact you can just rattle off the goal scorers' names about a game happening in 1890. It was something, as we were doing the research, that just astounded us. Absolutely amazing. Incredible the level of depth that the English pyramid goes to. The following seasons brought mid-table finishes and relative failure in the FA Cup, with semi-final defeats in 92-93 and 93-94. And the situation wasn't helped by the financial fallout from their move to Ewood Park.
The move would cost the club just under £3,000, and with admittance for fans costing basically the modern day equivalent of about 2.5 pence. And with gates of around 10,000, Rovers had to generate a lot of extra income by organising a lot of series of friendlies. And the decision to spend £2,500 purchasing the freehold of the ground, although making good sense, only added to this burden. And it was a theme that will reoccur with a lot of regularity as financial worries off the pitch held progress on it after this amazing sort of start to early life as an FA Cup team.
In following seasons, the club continued to slump down the league in 14th place and then followed this up, finishing 15th the following season. Because automatic promotion and relegation had not been introduced in those early days, Rovers were involved in the end-of-season test matches to determine their future status.
Their opponents in these test matches would be Burnley, Newcastle and Stoke City, and 3 back-to-back defeats seemed to doom them to relegation, but their saviour came from a very unlikely source, and that would be arch rivals Burnley. Burnley were safe, and there was a suggestion that the division should be increased from 16 to 18 teams, and this was a decision that Burnley backed, and that neither Rovers or Newcastle should be relegated. This proposal was accepted and they were saved, but I think what's very ironic is John Lewis of Blackburn Rovers, he actually voted against the expansion of the league because he believed that the increase in fixtures would interfere with the industrial life of the nation as spectators sought more time off to attend matches.
Football, he declared, should only play a minor part in the spectators' lives and in the affairs of the nation. Which, looking back now, is kind of insane to think of how gripping football is in the culture of the United Kingdom.
He had a very anti-groundhopper vision and was trying to stop this from happening. But so Burnley, in a sort of strange way, saved Blackburn from relegation. And the shock of a narrow escape galvanised the club and the Blackburn public, and fate also played its part with the arrival on the scene of a legendary figure by the name of Bob Crompton, who would make his debut against Stoke as a 17-year-old in 1897.
This moment marked the beginning of Bob Crompton's 45-year association with the club as a player and later as a manager. More lean years followed as the club concentrated on improving facilities at the ground. In 1905, a cover for 12,000 spectators at the cost of £1,680 was provided at one end of the ground. A year later, a 395-foot-long stand was erected along Nuttall Street, underneath which new changing rooms and offices were constructed.
Yes, in a period of 10 years, £23,000 had been spent on ground improvement, investing a lot in the facilities after having so long beforehand of having to move around everywhere. They're making this place home. These improvements would set a solid foundation for the first 3 decades of the 20th century, where Blackburn would still be considered one of the top teams in the English League. They would be First Division champions in the 1911-12 season and the 1913-14 season, and would once again win the FA Cup in the 1927-28 season with a 3-1 win over Huddersfield Town. Featuring heavily in all of those teams I've just mentioned was the previously mentioned Bob Crompton. So Bob was born in Blackburn and spent his entire career at fullback for Blackburn Rovers, playing 528 games between 1896 and 1920.
He was the captain of the team during those 1912-1914 championship winning seasons, and in the 1915-16 season he played for Blackpool in the regional league set up by the Football League during World War I, where he was also made club captain. His 41 England caps were even a record until surpassed by Billy Wright in 1952. He began his career at centre-half, but it was full-back where he excelled. Former player Charlie Buchanan described him as the astounding full-back of his time, a commanding personality, and he was the best kicker of a ball I'd ever ran across.
I want to run across. And in that FA Cup final that came in 1927-28, Bob was also involved and had a hand in that, because by that point he would be the manager of the club. And also, what I found completely mind-blowing, a stat I found out about the 1928 FA Cup final, was that was the first final in 18 years where both teams had scored, which sort of blew my mind. And I just had a look at sort of modern times to find like what's the longest run we've had in modern times. And there's actually between the 1994 FA Cup final and the 2005 FA Cup final, there was only one game out of those 12 finals that had both teams score. It was the closest we came to it since then.
Blackburn won the final 3-1 with 2 goals from Jack Roskamp and 1 from Tommy McLean.
To the cheers of their supporters, and are closely followed by Blackburn Rovers. The Rovers are a famous cup fighting team. They won the cup for the last time in 1927-28 and have won it in all 6 times, the same as Aston Villa. Play was fast and furious, and throughout the match there was a brilliant display of goalkeeping by both Hillier and Binns.
Crompton's team featured many interesting characters with incredible stories, 2 of which we'll focus on here, with Herbert Jones and Sid Puddlefoot.
Herbert Jones was notable as someone who had trained as a plumber before World War I, but then going on to serve his country and enlisting underage in 1914 when he was only 15 years old. During the war, he was stationed in France and actually took part in the Christmas truce of 1915. We actually found from a source a quote with him from later on. So he actually played a game of football with some German soldiers in no man's land. He would later write, "It was really sad to play football with them, then a few hours later have to start shooting and killing them. Those Germans were actually fine fellows." So like, literally looking at someone as like living through pure history and obviously absolute hell. He was wounded by shrapnel in 1916 and the injuries were severe enough to have him discharged from military service. His experiences led him to be a staunch pacifist for the rest of his life. And then you fast forward 13 years. So this is what he did before this. Fast forward 13 years is when he's then becoming an FA Cup winner. It's just like we in AF have got life easy nowadays, haven't we? Like, but it's wild.
The second player from that victorious team we've picked out was Sid Puddlefoot. Puddlefoot was born in Limehouse in the East End of London in 1894. He was spotted by West Ham United in a London Juniors match. He initially joined the Hammers as an amateur but signed on as a professional before the start of the 13-14 season. He quickly developed into a formidable force and scored 28 goals in 55 Southern League appearances for the club. He broke the club record for most individual goals scored in an FA Cup match, landing 5, including a hat-trick in 7 minutes in an 8-1 mauling of Chesterfield in the first round game of January of 1914. The record remains to this day and is also still West Ham's biggest victory in the competition. Unlike Herbert Jones, Puddlefoot spent most of the First World War within the UK. He worked at a munitions factory and was not called up for service until late on in the conflict. He made 126 appearances for the wartime London Combination League and scored nearly 100 goals, including 7 against Crystal Palace in the April of 1918, also a record for that competition. In the September of 1917, he played against QPR in the first ever game at Loftus Road and scored a hat-trick just to commemorate the experience. After the war, he resumed his scoring touch for West Ham, while in my opinion, never really stopped.
Yeah.
His exploits made him much sought after, and Falkirk, who had witnessed the player firsthand, won the battle for his transfer in February of 1922. Did you mean to put battle as a pun then? Considering it's like wartime language.
I'm going to say yeah, I did, yeah. The craziest thing about this as well is something I didn't know about this, and Falkirk are very proud of this till this day. They have things on their website and everything. The fee of £5,000 they paid was a world football transfer record at the time in 1922 and represents the only time a Scottish team has broken this record, like still to this day.
Such a move, of course, captured many headlines during the time, and especially caused people to ask if this transfer fee malarkey was getting a bit out of hand for the time, with the Football Post reacting to the transfer saying, "When will this folly at the part of football clubs come to an end? What is to be the limit? Is there to be a limit?"
Which I think is, you could literally, that could be reacting to like any modern transfer now, couldn't it?
As we record now, it would be mad to think of what they're thinking of the £116 million move Liverpool have just put together for Florian Wirtz, or many of the other £100 million plus transfers that have happened in the modern day.
Yeah, it's wild. But yeah, I just love that quote is just so applicable to today.
Over £5,000.
Over £5,000.
The Falkirk supporters were so eager to land their man, they themselves set up a public fund to raise money for the purchase. Puddlefoot himself earned £390 fee for agreeing the transfer. His younger brother Len followed him to Falkirk at the start of the following season for a month's trial, but only made one single appearance.
This reminds me of when Chelsea signed Hazard and they signed him and 3 of his brothers and stuff. It's just to keep him happy and keep him there.
I was wondering if anything about the signing on fee was also brought in headlines. Was that controversial at the time? He's only gone for the signing on fee.
Yeah. Well, bear in mind, when we've followed his career basically from him being born to all this point, and he's never once been anywhere near Scotland before. In Blackburn colours, Pudderfoot would make 250 appearances for Rovers, including the aforementioned FA Cup final, in which he played a big part in the opener. And it was a goal that would be very highly controversial these days, but seemed to be acceptable back in the 20s. As the Huddersfield goalkeeper collected a cross, the keeper crashed to the ground, and one of his teammates touched the ball through. So you can't imagine that happening. No, just fucking wipe out the keeper.
Goalkeepers have it too easy these days. He would go on to leave Blackburn, having scored 87 goals in 265 appearances in all competitions before finishing his career back at his boyhood club of West Ham United. However, Sid's post-playing career gets even more interesting, as if his career wasn't already mad enough, where he became coach at Fenerbahce. He would team up as the assistant to Josef Schwenk, the club's first ever foreign manager. So he's just had this wonderful career. He was one of the biggest transfers in England. He was a legend for West Ham, a legend for Blackburn, and then he's just going to dally off to Istanbul.
Maybe he was spending all of his signing on fee on a hair transplant. Yeah, and he would see success with the club, winning the 1932-33 Istanbul Football League Championship. However, had a poor relationship with the Hungarian manager, and then he moved to Istanbul rivals Galatasaray as their manager. It's I did not see this twist of career path coming. Especially going from Fenerbahce, going to Fenerbahce in the first place and then going to Galatasaray.
He has to have some balls. He has to have some huge balls to do that. Bloody hell. Neither of us saw this coming when we were doing the research on him, put it that way.
No. And what we found out in true Turkish football fashion, in the February of 1934, he was involved in an incident in which he was apparently manhandled while trying to calm players down during the game. Play was suspended and police were called in, and the crowd invaded the pitch, and as a result 17 of the 22 players who were involved in the match were suspended by the Turkish Football Association. So even in February of 1934, Turkish football, I think, was basically exactly the same as what it is now, sounding like actually with less corruption, because all the players were banned for doing these terrible things.
I mean, if you said that headline and you said Jose Mourinho had caused this and 17 players were now banned, I wouldn't even blink. I'd be like, yeah, that's happened. That absolutely happened. So yeah, Sid, a pioneer for Turkish football back then as well.
And a former most expensive player in the world.
Meanwhile, we roll back to that victorious Blackburn team managed by Bob Crompton, and he would go on to manage the team from 1926 to 1930. After a spell away, he returned to Rovers as the manager in the late 1930s to guide them to the Second Division Championship.
Crompton would have a heart attack in 1941 while watching Rovers play Burnley, while he was still in charge of Blackburn. His team had just won the match 3-2 and he would pass away later that evening. Bob, of course, was affectionately known as Mr. Blackburn, and it was announced by 2015 that he would be inducted into the Hall of Fame of the National Football Museum as a historic player.
It might sound a little bit morbid, but if there's going to be a way that Mr. Blackburn is going to leave this earth, watching his team thump Burnley must be a pretty fitting way.
Yeah, the Dingles.
Yeah. Crompton would also, in 2019, be the first player and manager to be entered into the Blackburn Rovers Football Club Hall of Fame as well.
Blackburn Rovers, one of the most famous clubs in the history of the great game, in which it has taken such a prominent part since 1879. It's just 50 years ago that they first won the FA Cup, a feat which they've repeated 5 times, 3 of these in successive years. To think of Blackburn Rovers is to recall Bob Crompton, one of the greatest players of all time. He began a long line of fine captains, which position is now held by Bruton. This popular skipper and international plays on the right wing, and his brilliant centres and corner kicks are well known at Eward Park.
Blackburn would continue to maintain a respectable mid-table position in the First Division until they would finally slip towards the relegation zone along with Aston Villa from the top flight and be relegated in the 1935-36 season.
And that was the first time since the foundation of the league that they'd actually been relegated. And when the league resumed after the Second World War, Blackburn were relegated in their second season. And at this time, a rather peculiar new tradition was born.
This tradition is known as the burial of the coffin. In a tradition going back to 1948, fans of Blackburn Rovers and Preston North End bury a coffin of relegation in the cellar of the Trades Hall Club, 11 miles from Eward Park, in the village of Bamber Bridge.
Supporters take to the streets of Bamber Bridge for a carnival-style burial of a club-branded coffin to mark their team's relegation. And the event has happened whenever either of the two teams have been relegated, and the coffin has then been raised when either of them have been promoted again. And I had never, ever heard of this before until I found this, which blew my mind. The parade, like you say, started in 1948, and this was after a greengrocer in Bamber Bridge packed a coffin full of vegetables and buried it following Blackburn's relegation to the old Division 2. And the vegetables were supposed to represent the players in the team, although nowadays it's a dummy called Chucky that lies in the coffin in the relevant kit, and there is an absolute horrible picture. I don't know if you've seen it yet, Joey. Click that link and get your live reaction. It's just horrible.
If anything, when I heard the name Chucky, I thought it'd be more kind of like gruesome or Halloween, but it's weirdly...
I think it makes it more creepy that it's not at like proper like Chucky from the film.
No, that's exactly what I was thinking. It just looks like a kind of young kid.
It's also wearing like a very, very vintage shirt though. It's probably worth quite a few quid. Burying that. But yeah, that is pretty morbid, isn't it?
And I would love to pick the brains of the greengrocer who started this tradition.
Yeah.
I'd love to think of like, what was he like? A leak for our leaky defence.
Yeah.
An onion because we stunk up the gaff.
Pumpkin for that fat bastard in defence. Truly bizarre, but yeah, it's crazy. And I would implore everybody to actually go. There's a full Wikipedia article called "Burial of the Coffin" for this tradition, and there's like do you know how you get like a list of FA Cup winners listed or something? There's a full section on like the years the coffin has been buried and the years of the coffin has been raised for both Blackburn and Preston.
The coffin has been buried for Blackburn 7 times and raised 6 times, the most recent being in 2018 after their immediate promotion back to the Championship.
I messaged my friend earlier who's a Preston North End fan to see if he had heard of this, and he had never heard of this. And he also raised some good points of like, well, what happens if Preston now get promoted to the Premier League or something, and like, but you haven't already been relegated, so it's already, the coffin is already out. So I was like, maybe you take it upstairs in the club or something. I don't know, put it in the loft.
So yeah, an utterly bizarre tradition, but I guess this is exactly what we do on this type of podcast.
If you've ever been to the Burial of the Coffin event for Blackburn or for Preston, I would love to hear from you. I also love the thing that this greengrocer originally did it because of Blackburn, and I'm putting 2 and 2 together to say like he was a Blackburn fan. Why did Preston start copying it? Like they first did it a year after, and I almost feel like it's like, you know, like who had "You'll Never Walk Alone" first and then started using things they just thought it was quite cool. So like, but it's clearly not spread any further than Blackburn and Preston. But yeah, it's very, very interesting. But I'm gonna go to whenever this happens again.
And please, anyone who knows anything more, please get in touch with the Journeymen and let us know, because this sounds like an utterly mad tradition.
I just really want one of them to get relegated so I can go now.
However, moving on, after the coffin had been buried, the club remained in the second division for the following 10 years. They would finally earn promotion and would like to think raise the coffin out the ground in 1958, and they again returned to mid-table position they'd occupied early in that part of the century.
During this time, they seldom made a serious challenge for a major trophy, although they did reach the 1960 FA Cup final when managed by Scotsman Dally Duncan. Rovers lost this game 3-0 to Wolves in front of a crowd of over 98,000 after playing most of the game with only 10 men on the field following an injury to future Wigan owner Dave Whelan, who broke a leg.
Incredible to think of how far the attendances have come in the early days when we were talking about massive figures of 10,000. And now, to be fair, quite a few years later, and it's nearly touching 100k. Absolutely insane. This FA Cup final was also notable for the first time the FA Cup winners would be given birth into European competition for the newly formed Cup Winners' Cup. With only 4 cameras being used for the entire broadcast, the commentator described the game early on as the white shirt final due to the breathless heat within Wembley Stadium, which led to the vast majority of spectators removing their jackets.
Because it was still the custom to attend the cup final in your Sunday best, so this led to an arena dominated by white-shirted spectators.
Managers Duncan and Cullis led Blackburn Rovers and Wolverhampton Wanderers onto the Wembley turf. It was like midsummer as Bill Slater spun the coin. Ronnie Clayton guessed wrong, so Wolves had choice of ends, for what it was worth. Blackburn supporters thought the goal very much against the run of the game. 2 minutes later, Rovers suffered sheer disaster. Left back Dave Whelan broke his leg. There really must be something about this Wembley turf. This was the 7th serious injury in 9 finals.
The press dubbed the game the Dustbin Final, due to, in part, feeling that the game had just been a bit rubbish, but also a bad reaction by Blackburn fans to the victorious Wolves team. As they paraded the cup, the Wolves players were pelted with match programmes, paper cups and other rubbish accumulated in the stands during the game.
A lot of rotten veg from the coffin as well. There were brief hopes of a return to glory in the 63-64 season when a remarkable 8-2 away win over West Ham in East London on Boxing Day took them to the top of the league. Their lead of the league was short-lived though, and they would finish the season somewhere down the table, as the title was seized by a Liverpool side who would record a further 12 league titles over the next 26 years.
Go on, you Reds.
While Blackburn's fortunes took a very, very different route.
As they were unfortunately relegated from the First Division in 1966, and this began a 26-year exile from the top division. During the 1970s, Blackburn Rovers bounced between the second and third divisions, winning the third division title in 1975, but never mounted a challenge for promotion to the first division, despite the efforts of successive managers to put the club back on track, and unfortunately they fell back into the third division in 1979.
But they would go up as runners-up in the third division in 1980, and a second successive promotion was nearly achieved the following year, but the club missed out on goal difference, and promotion-winning manager Howard Kendall moved to Everton, and that's another connection back to our last episode, Athletic Club, with his brief spell after leaving Everton at Athletic. Kendall's successor, Bobby Saxton, only managed mid-table finishes for the next 3 seasons. He nearly achieved promotion in the 84-85 season, but a poor finish the following year, just one place above the relegation zone, followed by an abysmal start to the 1986-87 season, cost Saxton his job.
Saxton was replaced by Don Mackay, who steered them to a decent finish in that season and also victory in the full Members' Cup. In the following 3 seasons, Mackay re-established Rovers as promotion contenders, but they fell short of promotion each time. The closest they came was in the 1988-89 season, as they reached the second division playoff final in its last season of the home and away 2-legged format, but unfortunately lost to Crystal Palace.
A defeat in the 1989-90 second division playoff semi-finals brought more frustration to Ewood Park, but the following season would see the club taken over by a local steelworks owner and lifelong supporter by the name of Jack Walker, who changed the club's fortunes completely on their head.
However, this is where we feel it's fitting to make a little break before we head into part 2.
And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more. 'Cause I'll stay a while's over forever and more. And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more. 'Cause I'll stay a while's over forever and more.
Join us next time as we get into the grips of record signings, record scorers, the return of silverware to Ewood Park, Champions League football, and even some Indian chickens.
Delicious.
So yeah, that's why we're going to call it quits here for part 1 on episode 11 at Blackburn Rovers. As we mentioned throughout the podcast, get in touch with any of your stories, any of your information. If you've been there or know someone who's been involved with any of these stories, we'd love to hear your input. And apart from that, check us out on social media for our giveaways, our ground hopping trips, any more information on the podcast. And apart from that, I think that's everything. I've been Joseph Corlett.
I've been Mark Reeves.
This has been the Journeymen podcast, and we'll see you all next time for part 2 on Blackburn Rovers.
Icelandic fan in like 2016.
It was pretty spectacular when you heard that for the first time. I remember watching that on TV. Like, fuck, what was that? What the hell is that?
Then you saw fucking Harry Kane taking a corner.
You deal with your unhealed trauma, Mark. I'll listen to the Iceland
I
fans.
remember that happened, and then we also announced like the Brexit vote that we were leaving within like 3 days. And I was on holiday, and it was the most fucking depressing thing ever.
I think I might keep this and then tack this right at the end of the pod.